We're starting on time, so that's great. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. I know this is a post-lunch session, which is why we've chosen hard to abate sector as the topic of the session. My name is Kinshu Dang. I'm the Senior Network and Partnerships Manager at Climate Catalyst. It's wonderful to have you all here with us today for our event called Building Demand for Green Steel in India, Public Procurement as a Lever to Accelerate Decarbonisation. This event is jointly hosted by Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, the India Energy and Climate Center at UC Berkeley, and Climate Catalyst. And the fact that we have three such different but complementary organizations co-hosting today tells you something about the nature of the challenge that we're dealing with. Generating demand for green steel is not just something that any one actor can solve. It requires industry, government, civil society, and research institutions pulling in the same direction. And that's exactly what the room today represents. Before we dive in, a quick word on what to expect today. We have a packed and exciting agenda. We'll start off with a welcome address, then we'll move on to keynote addresses from two former secretaries of steel who bring an insider perspective on where green public procurement can go. We have two presentations, one from India Energy and Climate Center at UC Berkeley and one from CII and Climate Catalyst. The presentations will be followed by a high-level panel discussion with steel producers and procurers chaired by Dr. Pradipto Ghosh, who's a distinguished fellow at TERI. We will kick off with a welcome address by Amit Khare, who's a program manager at Sequoia Climate Foundation, where he develops grant-making strategies to accelerate energy transition and climate action in India. Amit, over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And again, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Singh, Dr. Sharma, Dr. Ghosh, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome all of you to this very timely and very critical session, which is on building demand for green steel in India, public procurement as a lever to accelerate decarbonization. I'm unusually nervous today while welcoming all of you because this is one of those moments in life that you always look for. My mother is also in the audiences here, and I got to speak. And in the next session, she is going to be on the panel, and I will listen. So I would highly encourage all of you to stay for the next session as well, which is on women in frontiers, right? It's a very important session, so please stay for that as well. Well, as you all know, India is the world's second largest steel producer, and demand is expected to double by 2030. The scale of expansion ahead is extraordinary. The opportunity to shape the expansion towards a lower emission pathway is even more extraordinary. Today, Indian steel averages around 2.5 tons of CO2 emissions per ton of finished steel, higher than the global average. As we add new capacity, we are effectively choosing the emission profile of the next 30 to 40 years. So this is a very important moment because public procurement, as you know, account for about 25 to 30% of India's steel demand. That makes government not just a regulator, but one of the most powerful demand shaper in the system as well. In 2024, when Green Public Procurement Roadmap was launched, Green Steel Roadmap was launched, Green Public Procurement was identified as a key lever. And that's why this discussion is quite timely, especially in the context of CBAM, etc. I think in today's session, there are two policy briefs are going to be released. The one brief by India Energy and Climate Center, UC Berkeley. They looked closely at the cost trajectory of green hydrogen DRI steel and shows how a procurement mandate can be structured to be fiscally clear, credible, and resistant to greenwashing. The other brief, where Climate Catalyst and CII have gone directly to the market. They have engaged 25 steel producers representing nearly 60% of India's crude steel capacity and 12 major public procurers. That gives a real 360-degree view of both supply and demand. To close my welcome address, ladies and gentlemen, I want to just say that we have some of the most important voices in this space with us today. People who understand the policy, finance, and operational realities of both steelmaking and public procurement. So I welcome you all and look forward to hearing your insights and a candid discussion on what it will take to make this work in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amit, for setting the stage and for Sequoia's continued support and partnership in this work. Now, on to our first keynote speaker. We have Mr. Sanjay Singh. He's currently Director of Strategy and External Affairs at Jindal Steel and Power. As former Secretary of the Ministry of Steel, he was instrumental in building the roadmap for medium and long-term vision for the sector, with a focus on sustainability. He brings with him that rare combination of a policymaker's lens and on-the-ground industry experience. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sanjay Singh.
Namaskar, ladies and gentlemen. Why we are talking about government procurement? I would like to put the things in perspective. In 2025, when Government of India put forth National Determined Contribution, which is a mandatory aspect for climate mitigation, our national achievement in terms of reduction in the carbon intensity targeted at 45%, we had reached 36%. But when it comes to steel, in last 20 years, carbon intensity reduction has been 18-19%. And still, on an average, we are emitting 2.54 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel making. So that's why it becomes important. And why it is happening like that? Because there is a cost factor to it when we are talking in terms of green steel. But the first thing is, what is green steel? The problem is in terms of, like in our country, we have come out with a taxonomy for green steel, where anything above 2.2 tons of carbon dioxide is not green. And 3-star, 5-star rating is for that kind of steel, which is less than 1.6 tons of carbon dioxide. But when we talk in the perspective of the Paris Agreement, recently I came across some figures. They say that to be able to curtail our emission to 1.5 degrees centigrade, emission in steel should not be above 1 ton per ton of steel of carbon dioxide. So that's the number. But in our country it's 2.2. European standard is, they say anything above 1.5 ton would entail carbon tax. So because we are talking about CBAM now, so that's why it becomes important. So why government procurement? We are right now producing, this year we are expected to produce 165 million tons of steel. Out of that, 65% is getting into construction infrastructure sector. And of entire production, 27% is roughly, it is utilized in government projects. So basically, government is procuring 27% of steel. And when there is a carbon premium, it's a green premium on steel to the extent of 30 to 40%. So from where this kind of a price is going to come? Even if the producers produce green steel, are there buyers to buy it? That's number one. And right now, we do not even have the figure at how much of green steel is being produced. Government of India has come out with a target that by 2030, we'll be producing 4.5 million tons of green steel. And there is a long-term target as well. But the problem, there's several aspects. There is problem in measurement. There is problem in who is going to procure it, how it is going to be procured. So this is the kind of a ecosystem in which we are. Though I'll say, government has is providing a lot of levers, is set up the ecosystem towards production of green steel. I mean, in terms of taxonomy, although, I mean, these are the early days when we are talking in terms of the ratings in terms of star, 5-star, 3-star, and 4-star. So these are early days. So in time to come, they'll become more stringent, because frankly, if the target is 2.2 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel, I mean, then that does not provide any incentive or disincentive to one who is producing or who's producing green steel or who is emitting carbon dioxide when it comes to production. So, but nevertheless, taxonomy now is there, and then there is a mission for green hydrogen. There is a mission for renewable energy. There is a now the mission also for sustainability steel, which is already in place, and Ministry of Steel, Government of India is doing a lot towards carbon mitigation. So, but the problem remains on two fronts. Number one, the purchaser, who is going to purchase it, and second is about from where the cost of making green steel is going to come from. I'm talking about the green finance. When it is 30 to 40% more, and along with that, I'll come to other aspect also when it comes to India. Traditionally, the green steel making processes, what do you say, when we are thinking in terms of net zero, where the emission would be less than 500 kilos per ton of steel, is green hydrogen, DRI, electric arc furnace. I mean, that's the route. But for us in India, it's looking, it doesn't look possible at this juncture. Why? We are primarily blast furnace based. Number one. Number two, for electric arc furnace, one needs high quality raw material, in the sense that iron ore quality has to be good, and we have with every passing day, our quality of iron ore is getting down, and to the extent like before 2010, the iron ore Fe percentage in iron ore used to be between 65 to 67%. Now it has come down to less than 63%. Less than 63%, why I'm talking about? Because that is not suitable for EAF. So you have to enrich it in terms of through beneficiation, through pelletization, and so on. And further, our iron ore has a lot of alumina, and which will clog the furnaces. And green hydrogen, I mean, still it doesn't look like that it's going to be, come into existence for next 4 to 5 years. Definitely, green hydrogen has been there for quite some time, but at the right price, which is so that it becomes economically viable for the steel players. So, in this kind of an ecosystem, so one impetus to steel making, which is green, can only be provided by, I'll say, by the demand. I mean, that is going to be through a green public procurement, and there is a lot of scope for government to really in terms of quantum, to procure green steel, because when 27% is being procured by government, if government decides that 10 to 15% would be green steel, I mean, it would provide a very, very big push. And so with this kind of a support from the government, definitely entire steel sector, carbon emission, the ecosystem is going to transform. So I'm hopeful that maybe the target seems to be by 2027, or that when green procurement will come into being. So just I'm keeping my fingers crossed and very, very positive about it, that then that will provide a big impetus to it. And along with that, that will transform the entire ecosystem in the sense that then we'll have our standard of green steel, the taxonomy will get harmonized with the international standard. Because at 2.2 tons of carbon dioxide, that is not a green steel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. A very clear ask from you from the government, given the quantum of their mandate, to see if they can procure green steel. On to our next keynote speaker, we have Dr. Aruna Sharma, a development economist who served as a former secretary in the Ministry of Steel. Many of the policies that are operational today in the sector were drafted under her leadership, including the steel policy of 2017. She was also the chairperson of Demand Generation Task Force set up by the Ministry of Steel that shaped the Greening the Steel roadmap that was launched in 2024. Please welcome Dr. Aruna Sharma to share her thoughts on where green steel demand goes next.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Singh has set the platform so nicely and so beautifully. It eases my task, what I'm going to speak today. So I'd like to pick up from where he left. Basically, how do we ensure the public procurement? And why I'm focusing on that? Because when we drafted the steel policy in 2017, in 2015, the consumption of steel in India was 55 kg per capita. International norm was 200 kg, 250 kg per capita. So we were nowhere. And everybody was saying that steel is most polluting and it is cyclical. So the first attack was to do through reverse engineering. And what was done then, as very rightly said by Mr. Singh, 27% procurement comes from the government. And government procures it by general financial rules. And general financial rules had a statement that whenever you do the tenders, you will do the cost analysis. So in cost analysis, definitely steel was the loser. It was much more expensive than cement-oriented constructions. So what amendment was done there was we inserted the word life cycle cost. Instead of cost, life cycle. The moment this amendment came in GFR, it turned the table because life cycle cost steel is the winner. You have literally zero maintenance and 100 years of life. So exactly the same principle we have to do in green steel of reverse engineering. You created a demand in the market that today our consumption is touching 100 kg per capita from 2015 to 25. You just see the jump. And from 50 to 54, it took a decade. And from 54 to now nearly touching 100, it is in another decade. So you just see the kind of jump we have done it now. And same reverse engineering principle we have to do in green steel. We have to work by creating a demand for this green steel. If demand is there, then this is one sector, the investment, what was rightly said of 25 to 30%, will be done by the industry alone. What you have to do is to incentivize it by ensuring that there is a market available, there is a procurer available. And that procurer, you have to make a beginning with the government procurement, followed by real estate. Now, good construction real estate are being tutored and taught to them that it can be a USP to them for their project if they say that we are using green steel instead of any steel. So it can go at a USP, it can go at a premium for the good real estate developers, and that will create a demand for the green steel. We do have an issue of blast furnace. We do have an issue of scrap availability, which is definitely we are import dependent. Nearly still 7 million tons we are importing. And I think it will take a decade or maybe 15 years for us to have sufficient of your own scrap to go ahead with the clean steel making, which China and EU has already reached. Maximum of their steel making is coming from the scrap now. Not from the induction furnace, not so much from the blast furnace, and that is where the proportion, the pie graph rests. So we are going to take time for that. So we are going to be a DRI route, which each of the steel maker has now established that whatever they are going to export to EU, they will be doing the non-coal based DRI routes. So now everybody to that extent is shifting. One good thing that has happened that even though Trump sort of ridiculed the COP, India stuck to it, and they said, and the steel sector stuck to it, they said, we are conscious about the polluting industry and we are going to work upon it. So starting from carbon capture to modifying their blast furnaces to the kind of better routes for making of steel, everything was worked out in detail. And the PLI scheme supports this, that if you are going for green, there is a little bit of hand-holding there, which is a very good sign and which is really very impressive that the ministry and the steel makers, they're completely aligned on this issue. There is absolutely no dispute that Indian steel industry has to graduate to more and more percentage of producing green steel. As rightly said by Mr. Singh, hydrogen is far off as a main fuel. And carbon, because we do have indigenous carbon, so for thermal power and coking coal, even though we are importing, we have no alternative to blast furnace. But that constitutes 26% of flat steels. Long steels, we still have that leeway that we can go by electric arc furnace route or DRI non-coal based routes. And that is where the push can be, because their percentage in the pie graph usage and production coming from secondary sector is not small. They constitute the balance 52% of steel making. And that steel making is something the focus is on. These parameters and taxonomy has been set right to give it a push so that we'll come down. And you'll be amazed to know that what we do it through the non-carbon based DRI route, it is in decimals. Our emission is in decimals. So we qualify. But then it's cheating ourselves on the numbers, because we know maximum carbon emissions are coming through the blast furnace route, and which is our major sector. So issue is that in policy, it is very important to incentivize the production of green steel and disincentivize, which I always say, the induction furnace route completely, so that the new investments does not come in the induction furnace route and it comes more in the DRI, non-coal or electric arc furnace route. It is very, very important that at least the new expansion of another 50 to 100, which we are going to go ahead with, is sort of diversified into these kind of routes which are cleaner and better, so that our overall numbers come down and we are able to compete with the emission norms. So we will have a steel which will be around 1.5 less or in decimals, and we'll have steel which will be touching 2 or 2.1 or maybe 1.9 ideal situation. So this kind of a strategy is very important of incentivization and disincentivization. And that is where the debate is going on, because this is going to help in a very, very big way as we proceed ahead and we demand for green steel. Definitely the cost of steel, green steel, is going to go up by 8 to 10%. But if you look at the volumes, it is going to be big. One of the recommendations from Steel Ministry, which has not seen light of the day, is to give tax concessions. So green steel, no GST. It will offset that 10%, which is an enhanced cost. So the procuring departments in the government like NHAI and others, or NBCC, which are going into the construction in a very, very big way, and they are the major procurer, it is not going to offset their estimation, because in India, the construction is very price sensitive, very, very price sensitive. So adding that 10% cost, right in the beginning, there is going to be a lot of grumble from these people, and that's where the whole thing is stuck, to make it mandatory for them to procure the green steel. And that is what needs to be resolved. So some relief in taxation, I think, from government's one pocket to another is not going to make much of a difference. But it will give a trigger to the production of green steel. It will bring in investments for the green steel production. And it is also going to sort of make India in the map of being conscious on making green steel. CBAM we can compete with. There's no problem, because we export a very small quantity in tonnage if you look at it. So that we'll be able to handle. But then by 2030, if our target is to have 60 million tons of export from the country out of 300 million tons of production, then yes, we will have to by then bring in these corrective measures so that we are able to come up with CBAM kind of discipline which is coming across the globe so that we are able to compete in that markets by bringing in a green steel which is well labeled. Definitely, there is an experiment now which is triggered, just rolled down by Steel Ministry by giving some of the sample plants, both blast furnace route and non-blast furnace route, to bring in the gradation assessment of how much is embedded carbon and non-embedded carbon. So some software AI-based things have come up, which are going to be tested, experimented. Let's hope it works very well. If it finds the light of the day, then we will have an actual measure, batch-wise, industry-wise, as to where do we stand. And that will be like an improvement scale for each of the industry to themselves as to how they are going to go about or how they are going to graduate about it. So I like to end up with this, that one good thing in India is there is absolutely zero debate that we have to graduate to go for green steel. There is zero debate that trigger to the green steel will come by reverse engineering, by making it a mandate for government to buy a percentage of their procurement which is green. And that will be the beginning point where the private sector, especially real estate and others, will come forward and go ahead for the green steel. That additional cost needs to be offset by a concession in the taxation structure, which is the easiest thing to do, not very difficult, or maybe some other way to sort of give that advantage to the procuring ministry. Because definitely 10% more of the cost means NHAI people will be up in arms against the steel ministry. So that what is need to be ironed out, that what is need to be taken care of. And definitely India in the map of green steel, speaking very loudly on the need of this sector, removing the label of the most polluting sector and graduate to a much better environment-friendly production processes. Thank you so much. Right.
Thank you so much for very clearly laying out the next steps to avoid carbon lock-in, incentivize non-coal DRI production through measures like GST rationalization. I think this is a good segue into the two presentations for today that move the conversation meaningfully forward on GPP. Together, I believe they offer the first clear articulation of what a green public procurement mandate for steel in India could look like. First, joining us virtually is Nilima Jain. She's the Director of State Initiatives at the India Energy and Climate Center, UC Berkeley. Nilima's policy brief tackles a question that is central to today's discussion. What would a minimal targeted green public procurement mandate actually need to look like to de-risk first-of-a-kind hydrogen DRI EAF capacity? That too, as ma'am said, without imposing material fiscal costs. Nilima, over to you. Can you hear us?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. And can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you to the organizers, Sikoya, Terry, Shakti, and co-hosts, Climate Catalyst and CII for allowing the India Energy Climate Center at UC Berkeley the space to present our work. I'll only be echoing the sentiments expressed in the keynote remarks. So in the next 15 minutes, I will make one practical case. And as India is planning its next wave of steel capacity, green H2DRI EAF is the most viable near-term primary route to scale. And public procurement can help make the first projects bankable. So on maturity and near-term deployability, our analysis shows that H2DRI is the leading option today because it builds on a process the industry already uses, DRI, rather than requiring a fundamentally new route. And while we keep encouraging all the upgrades across the existing fleet, the key questions for us is, how do we also create space and support for near zero primary routes? So India doesn't lock into a slightly more efficient version of the old system. So with that frame, let me start with the scale of the steel build out and the lock-in it creates. I'm assuming that the presentation is on and we are on the first slide.
Yes, Nilima.
Thank you. So on current plans, India's 2030-31 expansion remains blast furnace dominant, roughly 180 to 195 million tons of BFBOF capacity. And in practical terms, that is around 161 million tons a year of coking coal demand, with roughly 90% likely imported. So this itself will create about $29 billion a year of import bill, which then roughly becomes $1 trillion cumulatively over a typically 40-year asset life. So lock-in is not only emissions, it's a long-lived forex and commodity exposure. And at the same time, the economics for H2DRI are moving fast. So across the studies, the recent studies that have come out in India, the premium of H2DRI with BFBOF is narrowing through the 2030s, with many landing parity in the 2030-2040 window. What ICC's work shows is that the parity can land by 2030 once you price in the forex and inflation risk. And India's input cost edge is the reason that this is plausible. What ICC estimates is that the green hydrogen price is roughly $3 per kilo delivered. Now, if you compare that with what is happening in Europe, Europe is materially higher. So, for example, there is a $7 per kg price that has been discovered in Germany, about $10 in Spain, about $10 in UK, and hydrogen being the dominant operating cost driver in H2DRI, this gap is pretty strategic. So finally, when we talk about CBAM, and it's not just CBAM, if you look at how many of export markets such as Australia, Canada, UK, they're all tightening the carbon leakage too. And as India's trade agreement momentum is accelerating, the verified low emission products like H2DRI can become a larger advantage. And it's not just a compliance story. It will become a most export competitiveness story for India. Next slide, please. So these two charts make one message very concrete, that parity is actually a risk story. Now, H2DRI-EAF's dominant variable cost is electricity, and in India, that electricity can be contracted through long tenure INR-dominated renewable PPAs. Now, often these PPAs are 25 years long, so that's inflation proofing for a H2DRI-EAF route. However, when you look at the blast furnace route, that is structurally different. A big chunk of its cost base is imported, met coal, which is priced in dollars, and over the life of an asset, the coal price inflation and the INR depreciation both feed through. That's why the two charts differ. So in the first chart, what you see is the 2030 base case. The premium between the BFBOF, new BFBOF, and H2DRI is still small. It's just about $26. Whereas in the second chart, once you account for coal inflation and currency depreciation in the BFBOF, even under conservative half historical adjustment rates, the BFBOF rises to about $588, which shifts the H2DRI-EAF from a small premium to parity, to advantage, under the same technological assumptions that we are making in 2030. So, and one piece of context matters here. Hydrogen cost dominates the H2DRI cost. So a typical H2DRI system uses in the order of 66 kilograms of hydrogen per ton of steel. So $1 change in delivered hydrogen is roughly $66 per ton of steel. So that is why the difference between $3 in India and what is being discovered in Europe is so consequential. So if these economics can work, the binding question really becomes, what is really holding back the first projects, and how do we clear that for scale? Next slide, please. See, these are all familiar barriers, and these have come up in several consultations with the industry, with the policymakers. But the evidence that we have uncovered helps us separate the hard constraints from, finan- from financeability constraints. So first, the high hydrogen DRI bankability. The constraint is that lenders price first plants as technology risk because continuous 100% green hydrogen operation is still limited, and many demonstrations around the world use blends. But what the evidence shows is that for mainstream shaft furnace technologies like Midrex, shifting from a natural gas based syngas to hydrogen rich gas is an incremental retrofit, not a fundamental redesign. And there are several real reference points available. There is an HPISS module that is reported above 60% hydrogen share in China. The issue really is not feasibility, it is contractable performance and risk allocation. The second constraint that is repeatedly brought up is the DR grade ore and pallets at scale. The constraint is the common 66-67% Fe pallet benchmark, which triggers concern about the supply. But what the evidence is showing is that ore grade is a cost and a performance trade-off. For example, in ICC analysis, we have used 1.5x of the pallet cost than what prevails. And still, we have a very small premium as far as the H2DRI cost is concerned in 2030. Now, the beneficiation and pelletization routes for both hematite fines and for magnetite are well documented in India, and some Indian plant practice actually supports the point. So the policy implication is really coordination and ore and pellet strategy with mapping, logistics, not really a binary can't or can. It's a cost issue. It's not a technological issue as the evidence shows. The third piece is, of course, bankable demand. The constraint is that without a creditworthy multi-year procurement carve-out, early near-zero volumes remain too uncertain to finance new capacity. And India has a working template for converting, some of the policy intent into financeable demand. We've seen that RPOs did it for wind and solar. Also, in the green ammonia case, there were off-takes that were firmed up. So steel just needs an analogous demand anchor for the first near zero tons. Next slide, please. So this is a demand package, and it's designed as a sequence. Level one is make a near zero label contractable. See, India's green steel taxonomy is already an MRV ready framework. And that tiered ladder is useful for scaling certification and moving the whole market, but it does not by itself create a single procurement grade near zero threshold that can be used consistently in tenders and pooled offtake contracts. And without a distinct near zero gate, any early demand tool can be met by incremental improvements that will sit inside the 3-star to 5-star bands. And so what we are proposing is that an overlay label, a near zero star label, used only as an eligibility gate for demand instruments. It is performance based, route neutral, but set at a near zero emission level. The second lever is use green public procurement as the anchor buyer through a dedicated carve out. The proposal is that initial 5% mandate beginning in 2031-32 is reserved for near zero labels from the H2DRI, HPI, EAF specifically. And the scale of investment is fiscally small. A 5% mandate, as we calculate, is about 3 million ton, again a 62 to 68 million ton infrastructure demand. And our analysis shows that cost budget impact is about 81 to 88 million dollars, which is around 0.05% of the total infrastructure spend. And if you account for the coal inflation and forex stress, that premium actually shrinks sharply and actually even flips. So, yeah, design details are what that will make it implementable. Start with standard high volume categories and ratchet the share every 2 years as verified supply scales. Level 3 is pooled offtake with payment security. This is very similar to what SECI did for green ammonia tenders. The concrete model is we propose a SECI-style intermediary auction for near zero eligible green steel. But the governance detail really matters here. SECI's green ammonia procurement was supported by a whole of government oversight. There's a National Green Hydrogen Mission, which includes an empowered group which is chaired by the Cabinet Secretary. So a similar cross-ministry governance channel will be useful for steel because demand creation, fiscal design, verification, all of them have to move in step. Next slide, please. So the demand tools will only work if first plans can execute on time and vendors can underwrite performance. So these enablers that are listed here map directly to those barriers. First, make the performance bankable, standardize the OEM and EPC guarantees. Again, SECI's Green Ammonia program is practical precedent, which links contract execution to verification of performance bank guarantees and is defined formats and timelines. Second, reduce the integration risk early. So allow modular deployment. That's already happening in India. Some of the new players are looking at standalone green HPI or green iron modules with a long-term offtake. And again, green iron HPI is a tradable intermediate. It broadens the buyer base and it shortens the route to first revenues. Third, bring financing and execution to standard terms. So export credit agency finance can really reduce borrowing costs. All the H2DRI plants in India are European make. So having export credit agency desk actually helps and can create extended tenor for imported technology packages. And there are several precedents available in Europe where some of the plants have been ECA covered. There is a Salzgitter plant which secured a 500 million ECA covered finance package from an Austrian bank and from an Italian bank. I'm sure Indian manufacturers could do the same. So the fourth one is make feedstock readiness explicit, publish an H2DRI ore and pallet strategy, map hematite and magnetite supply, and there is some guidance across the FE ranges and safeguards for, of course, environment and tailing, so investors can plan with fewer unknowns. I think with that, I'll say if we want material near zero primary volumes delivered in the early 2030s, the key decisions are in the next 2 to 3 years. Define the procurement grade near zero gate, have the taxonomy review, set up the MRV and registry plumbing, and design the procurement tranche and pooled offtakes. The projects can actually contract in the late 2020s for 2032 delivery. The core message is that public procurement does not have to be large to be powerful. Even a small, auditable, near zero carve-out paired with bankable contracting and targeted enablers can unlock first projects and move the cost curve faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilima. You've given us a precise picture of what a targeted mandate for near zero steel could look like, which brings us to the next question. Is India actually ready for it? Are producers ready to supply this steel, green steel? Are procurers ready to buy green steel? Which is what our next presentation will focus on. I'd like to call Govind Vashisht, who's a senior counselor at CII, and Nandan Shralaya, I'm pretty sure I mispronounced your surname, program lead at Climate Catalyst. They'll be sharing their findings from one of the first integrated assessments of India's readiness for green steel public procurement. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to have many familiar faces. Before I get into the details, would you like a procurement joke? Okay, let me quickly start one. It might not be very funny, but it'd be great if you could laugh. Bureaucrat from the Ministry of Finance, extremely bothered by all the questions he's getting regarding the green premium, decides to visit a wise old man in the Himalayas. He goes there and he says to the wise old man, "Sir, everybody just comes to me, how do I afford the green premium? How do we afford the green premium? We don't actually have it in our budget." So the wise old man thinks for a bit and then he says, "You have it. You're just calling it different things, like a disaster relief package, or a crop assistance program, or a climate mitigation, climate adaptation, flood adaptation fund, you know. So you just have to really think through about whether you want to spend, what your priorities really need to be." My joke might not have landed, but I hope my presentation will. Okay, let's go ahead. I'll quickly run through this because I think everyone's here to listen to the panel. We expect about 62.9 million tons of demand that will come from the government in 2030, right? So that's a big number. That's almost a 100% jump from where things stand as of today. So that's a huge, huge number that just to give you a sense of the volume that's going to come out of this. Is there a clicker? Okay, sorry, there's a clicker. Government infrastructure projects are about 22% of steel demand as per what we saw from 2024. The number varies between 22 to 25%. But just these projects generated over 78 million tons of carbon dioxide. This is fairly significant. When we looked further and said what is the potential to actually reduce some of this, we saw that there are about 721 infrastructure projects now that are almost in the approval pipeline. It's a fairly big number of about 320 billion. All of these projects will likely use steel. So the impact that a public procurement mandate can actually have, not just from a budget standpoint, but also from an emission reduction standpoint, is massive. We have been looking at green public procurement at Climate Catalyst for the last 3 to 4 years. We commissioned our first study in 2022, 2023. That study basically said that, GPP could have both direct impact, which is obviously emission reduction as a consequence of public procuring, but the indirect impact is equally significant, which is that companies will invest in greener processes, they'll upgrade their plant, optimizations will happen. This will also further result in cost reduction. But this study didn't give us a really full view of the ecosystem. Then last year, what we started doing is a bunch of countries have started operationalizing GPP. America has had some experience with the Buy Clean California Act. There's a bunch of Buy Clean across different states. Japan has just essentially put together has had a green purchasing act for over 2 decades, but they've put together a transformation strategy of which green public procurement is a big part. And Italy is in fact one of the European leaders in GPP. So we started looking at what all of these different countries are doing, but that still did not give us a full picture. So when we went to CII, we basically asked them, who are the steel producers that are actually producing 3-star, 4-star, 5-star steel? What volumes do you have? What is the pricing? What are the products? Are governments really willing to buy this? What are the procurers saying? Actually, we have many studies on the producers, but we don't actually have any information on what the procurers are thinking. This is new, right? Nobody really quite knows. What are the barriers? What are the procurers thinking? Is it price sensitivity? Is it quality? What are their concerns? And eventually, how much of this is actually going to result in real emission reduction potential? So the first thing that we did is we did a fairly really interesting study. We basically reached out to about 28 steel producers. This is about 60% of India's national capacity, about 88 million tons. Pretty much all your ISPs were covered, a whole bunch of SSPs as well. We also looked at some of those organizations who have already received green steel certificates. And on the public procurer side, we looked at about 12 public buyers of steel. All of them, in fact, procure more than 100,000 tons of steel. So fairly large, including your NHAI, Indian Railways, Power Grid, NTPC, NHPC. Credit to the CII team for doing such an extensive mapping. Before I get into the quick findings of the report, just to give people a quick understanding of what the Indian steel sector looks like, there's about 144 million tons. But the number that comes from your steel processing units, SPU, and your hot re-rolling mills at about 36 million tons is already green. So the challenge really is to green the ISPs and the SSPs. ISPs have emission intensity of 2.8, SSPs have average emission intensity of 2.6. So the big challenge is how do you green the 107 to 108 million tons? This is also really where the volumes of public procurement are going to come from. Public procurement volumes are not going to come from your SPUs and the other places really. So you might already hear that, you know, the Green Steel NISST has already issued green steel certificates. So they've already about issued 10 million tons, but this broadly covers some of the other categories as against ISPs and SSPs. So what we did is let's estimate what the future steel availability is. We looked at the CCTS baseline data. We looked at some of the things that's happening on taxonomy. We consulted all of these different players. We spoke to different organizations, understood their annual reports. And the big number is we tried to model 3 scenarios: a low scenario, a medium scenario, and a high scenario. A low scenario is essentially BAU. If things go as planned, we will go at a 2% year-on-year reduction pathway. In this, you are essentially, companies are just investing in incremental retrofits, some amount of renewables. Scrap growth continues to be slow. But in the medium and high reduction pathways, which is about 4 and 6%, you're investing in optimization, meeting complete RE consumption obligation, you're focused on organized recycling, building out clusters. Scrap is definitely highly available. And then at the high scenario, obviously need H2 DRI deployment plus CCUS. So if we go by that logic, the numbers are what I've highlighted in red. In the low scenario, we'll have about 28.2. In high, we'll have about 30. In medium, we'll have about 30. And in high, we'll have about 55. Just to break this number down a little bit more further. Today, we are at 4.68, FY25. FY30, if we have 28.22, this is not really a very enviable thing to have. It sounds like good volumes, but if you see the number right below, 23.5 is just 3-star steel. So as Mr. Singh said, that's 2.2 is not really green steel. It's great that we have a taxonomy. So that's not something to aim for. But if you go in the medium scenario, you begin to see that FY28 onwards, volumes really improve. You suddenly have 23 million tons in FY28. And not just you have 30 million tons, but your 4-star steel, suddenly volumes are a lot more. You have 11.4 million tons of 4-star steel. So that's really the big difference between the low scenario and the medium scenario. The medium scenario essentially incentivizes higher quality steel. The 5-star steel number is obviously ambitious at 55 million tons. I don't think we will be able to achieve it. What we then did is we looked at 2 mandates. And you might ask me, why did you think of 2 random numbers like 26% and 37%? In fact, this is a question that I keep getting all the time. The answer is very simple. The government actually came up with these numbers. 37% was their initial idea of a GPP, as per some of the news reports that were quoted. And then they eventually narrowed it down and said, no, 37 is too ambitious, let's go with 26. So just using the government numbers, what does it look like? If you see FY30, on the demand side, we have about 16 million tons. And on the supply side, we have about 30 million tons. The story, what this means is 26% mandate is very, very simple to achieve. There's more than enough volume to make up for demand, almost double. We should always assume that not all steel will go to public procurement, right? So, but largely speaking, there is almost double available. At a 37% mandate, things get a little tricky in the short term. 2028, we are not essentially able to meet demand. There's a small mismatch. We have about 18 million tons in demand, and supply is only 12 million tons. So 37% is actually going to be a bit of a challenge. If I had to put this very simply in a graph, the blue, you see the demand line, and you see all the supply lines. So in the 26% mandate, all the supply lines are comfortably above the demand line. No issues. But in the 37% demand mandate, you see a little bit of a collision. Now you might think that there's 2 ways to look at it. The first way to say is, oh my God, I don't think we can actually operationalize the 37% mandate. But this collision is actually very good news from an economic standpoint, because it's only when you begin to have collisions like this, are you actually able to influence new build out. Because that's when you're like, okay, we're not able to actually meet supply. So this is the time to actually invest in building out that demand. So that collision and these kinds of tension between demand and supply is very critical. Long story short, we are seeing two things. I think green steel output will really increase from 2027. AMNS will be the first company likely to enter that category, so there'll be a big volume available there. Near-term gains will really come from energy efficiency, RE, and scrap, but largely going further, we will have to depend on DRI, EF, hydrogen, and CCU as hubs. So our mandate that what we are recommending is fairly straightforward. One is today announce a mandate. Announcing is critical. Today, announce a mandate, commit to at least 1-2 voluntary pilots, and start implementation 2028 onwards. You can obviously stick with your 26% mandate that works, and in 2028, commit to increasing that further from 2030 onwards. So increase your share, and if you're not able to do 37%, if that's too ambitious, at least try and increase the share of 4 and 5-star steel, because that will actually drive decarbonization efforts. Emissions are anyway reducing across all mandates. India will, all the work that we're doing will result in emission reduction. We have looked these, as you see, at 2.5, even if you go in the low scenario, we're at 2.2. So that is obviously news, but nothing to celebrate. What we need is if the mandate comes, then we can actually, avoid up to 20.9 million tons of CO2. That's fairly significant. And then the last point I would say before I hand over to Govind is green steel, cost people, we keep saying it's expensive. It's expensive from a producer standpoint, but from a procurer standpoint, actually the costs are very minimal. That's what one of the key takeaways of our study. We looked at different case studies, and I'll get Govind to talk to you about this. And even Mr. Sinha, who we worked with to put together some of his views on this in the Hindu last week, has said that how much ever you work on the premium, at the level of the project, the cost can be only 0.2 to 1.5 or 2%. So I'll stop there and hand over to Govind for the rest.
Thanks, Nandan, for articulating the findings of the data. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So going forward, I'll talk about what we found from our survey. Nandan touched upon the data. So if you see the data, what we are trying to present is the EF units, induction furnace units in western, eastern and northwestern parts of the country. Say typically in Chhattisgarh, Punjab, Maharashtra and West Bengal, structurally closest to the taxonomy threshold due to high scrap use. They are exclusively scrap, or they are into reprocessing. And then already like seniors have mentioned, there is a domestic scrap shortage of up to 30 million ton by 2030. These have export restrictions. These are perhaps due to export restrictions by other countries. Quality and duties are constrained. There is a high cost of green feedstock. Okay, US dollar, it ranges between $4 to $5 a kg. I'll give you an example here. So when we were interviewing people for this, one of the steel players, in Chhattisgarh, there is the NG line that is already there. We asked one of the leaders of the steel plants, why have you not taken it? There is such a big advantage and there is significant thing. He told me this important one, it was a good eye-opener. He said, "Theek hai, you are saying it is a very good thing for industry and this thing, I will do it. I will put the plant. 4 or 5 times more expensive than coal DRA because of imported, that also okay. I will absorb it, I'll put it once. But can you guarantee me the quantity and at the price that I require for the up to the 5 years? Can you give me that?" Okay, because that's not something we control. So there, that question was very poignant. Okay, there we said, okay, let's see how it plays. But then the infrastructure is there. If that can be bridged, then perhaps they would consider. Okay, and then non-disclosure of upstream emissions. See, even the CCTS program itself takes only the plant boundary emissions. Now, upstream and downstream are not yet captured there. So, as a holistic picture, that also needs to be done going forward. In the survey, what we found was faster electricity gains from fuels. If you see the first point, RE is scaling. And then if you see the second point, it is like electrification with RE and scrap supply. The plants emphasize this because it doesn't require wholesale changes at their infrastructure level. In plant, they don't have to do much. It is like they are absorbed, they can simply buy RE electricity or just buy more scrap. That can be done without too much investment from their perspective. Also, the green hydrogen pilots also, even I was surprised that secondary steel plants were very, very open to green hydrogen pilots. So that was one of the study. Then we also think that what happens is there is CBAM, that is CBAM thing that is based on the European carbon market, and then we have the CCTS thing coming up. One thing is we need it aligned with all the frameworks, so that when we export, we are not bridging two different measures. So that is one thing they emphasize, because many of them were exporting two things, and they were all asking us. Many of the private majors and wherever forging plants are there, no, they're asking them, what is your emission? So that level of consciousness already is there. So, and then data quality is a concern. Some of them are not this thing, and we are even seeing that there are some mismatch between what they actually declare and what is actually in the plant. So some of the, sorry, just a minute. Yeah. If you see across all the four majors, we are seeing that AMNS is likely, this is based on the CCTS draft notification. Okay, they are able to, they are most likely to come to the 3-star mandate by 2027. Okay, and Tata Steel Jamshedpur with the combined Jamshedpur and Kalingnagar with 14.17 million ton, they are already a very, very competent and well managed plant, and they are already they are possibly targeting about FY 2028 for coming into the 3-star category. And we have to know that Tata Steel, even in the public domain, it is there that they have tried the latest and best technologies that is available, like hydrogen pilots and etc. So they are well there. As is JSW, they are also trying big green hydrogen mission, which is the 3rd stage of what we are looking at. So that is good. The SAIL infrastructure, their legacy, their infrastructure is a little bit legacy. They are building out new infrastructure, and they are doing it at scale. So we expect that they also come in, but as per the data and our analysis, we expect that they take some time between 2030 and 2032 to come there to the green steel, this thing. 93% of our surveyed people said they deliver green steel at scale. Okay, on the only couple of enabling conditions to meet. There is high upfront capital costs, especially with respect to newer technologies that is there, and uncertainty around demand acceptance. There is how will the market absorb? Okay, I will build. Who's going to buy my steel at a premium? That was a common question across all our participants. Limited in-house technicalities among smaller producers. Okay, that can be bridged by technology providers. That is also something that can be done. Producers are asking for concessional lending and targeted viability gap, basically interest subvention schemes. That is something that they're willing to absorb. And like in the barriers, they are also expecting a clear procurement mandate. Who will buy and at what amount? And dedicated financial assistance for MSMEs. Decarbonization pathway, just going, building on this. If you see across all of them, they are the same thing, renewable, scrap, and hydrogen pilots. But a couple of measures, see, for example, the AMNS measure, they're doing in 3 different routes: hydrogen, Corex, blast furnace, and gas DRI. The others are like more a single route builders. And similarly for SAIL is mostly exclusively blast furnace build-outs. And in the Raipur cluster, it was also seen that many of the plants have completely electrified their entire transport infrastructure. Okay, we were seeing that even hydras, loaders, and every single vehicle is completely electrified, because they having their own CPPs and RE. They thought, why not do it? Why to increase fuel? That is a major lever, and that's a very strong lever that is playing out there. There are many such players actually dedicatedly manufacturing. In fact, they are even converting fossil fuel to battery operated. So demand side readiness, some other findings are like they are able to, many 8 of the 12 agencies procure more than 100,000 tons per year. But the procurement criteria, like Madam put it, it's on L1 criteria, okay, on all public procurement. That is what is going to, if quality is assured, as on date, I'll go with L1. And schedule of rates, it has to be programmed. Even if it is available, it has to be incorporated into the schedule of rates. Okay, only then can you procure it. I cannot procure. For example, if you see the JPC report, the average per ton cost is 60,000 rupees per ton. Okay, and then if you increase premium and all, there is an additional cost. But in today's SIR, you cannot procure that. Okay, that's one mandate. And dispersed authority across, the authority to do it is currently dispersed across central, state, and PSU base. You need some parity over there. Sorry. So some of the findings, if you see NHAI procures up to 13% of all public, 12 to 13% of all procurements. They basically said include SOR and say we will implement it. Okay, straight. That was one of the common factors across all the major public procurers. Give me a mandate, I'll do it. I am bounden to. Okay, that was one of the common mandates. And likewise across all the other ones. So I'll just touch upon 3 case studies that we did to study this. One on Prime Minister Awas Yojana and then Metro Rail projects. If you see this little bit of data, the steel increase cost, we have done a model if you can see this thing. The project cost is only increasing by 0.3% in PMAY. Okay, and the emission reduction is up to 0.94 million tons of carbon dioxide emission reduction. In Metro Rail, we did about 584 kilometers of upcoming build-outs. Okay, that was what we did, and we saw that the project increase on an average, weighted average, is about 1.08%. And similarly, for Indian Railways East Coast dedicated freight corridor, we took up the study and just modeled it. So across all this, there is significant reduction in carbon emission and with minimal cost in project rise. This is between 26% mandate and 37% mandate as shown here. So in summary, the 3 priority actions, like already Nandan has emphasized, is like formal notification of a green procurement mandate by March 2026 and a voluntary pilot basis by 2026 across high value flagship projects. Address early green steel price premium. Okay, how we can do it is preferential green margins that is notified, and the limited duration GST relief, like it has already been funded, and some viability linked gap funding for new technology, and then proper CCTS notification and upcoming maturity of the markets. And then, like I said, integrate certified green steel into government e-marketplace. They are the biggest buyers individually. Most of the buying happens from that. I mean, at significant parts of it. And then, then there is an agency-specific scheduled rate of this one. I rest my case, and then these are findings, and thank you. Please take a look at a report for a detailed presentation and all of the things due to limitation of time. Thank you so much for patient listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nandan and Govind. I would like to call the following folks on stage to launch the report and the policy brief. Dr. Aruna Sharma, Mr. Sanjay Singh, Mr. Amit Khare as well, Ms. Seema Arora, who's the Deputy Director General CII, Stephen Hale, he's the Chief Executive Officer, Climate Catalyst, Sakshi Balani, the Director for Policy and Director for India at Climate Catalyst, and Mr. Mohit Bhargava, Country Director, India Energy and Climate Center, UC Berkeley. Is Nilima still with us? Yeah, so we can bring Nilima also on the screen. I will quickly move us along to the panel discussion, which will be chaired by Dr. Pradeep Ghosh, who's a distinguished fellow at TERI. He has retired as the Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and has held some of the most consequential positions, including Economic Advisor and Additional Secretary to the Prime Minister. Sir, may I call you on the stage? Thank you so much. I'd also like to invite Dr. Arvind Bodhankar, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer at ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel. Few people in this room understand industrial sustainability better than Dr. Bodhankar, given his 3 decades of experience across petrochemicals, cement, and steel. Is Dr. Bodhankar in the room? Yes, you're here. Okay. Ms. Seema Arora, who's the Deputy Director General CII, has spent over 3 decades making the business case for sustainability and climate action for Indian industry. As the person who pioneered sustainable development work within CII, she's been in the room, metaphorically speaking, since before the Earth Summit in 1992. Mr. Mohit Bhargava is the Country Director, India Energy and Climate Center, UC Berkeley. As the former CEO of NTPC Green Energy, he led the growth of NTPC's renewable pipeline from 1 gigawatt to over 25 gigawatt in under 55 months. Next up, we have Mr. Alok Kansal, who's the former General Manager, Indian Railways. He has nearly 4 decades of experience in the Indian Railways, having executed infrastructure projects exceeding 1 lakh crore rupees. And finally, Mr. J.C. Kakoti, who's the former General Manager of NTPC Limited. He has spent 20 years at NTPC and retired as the Head of Hydro Engineering. Over to you, Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this important seminar and to speak at this panel. We were supposed to have 50 minutes for the session, and by my watch, nowadays all watches say the same time, we have 20 minutes.
I'll check if we can extend.
Yeah. So, well, you know, this really puts a crimp, because no matter how much we extend it, we can't extend it to the full 50 minutes, including 10 minutes for Q&A. So let me just, you know, by way of sort of getting the ball rolling, let me ask how many of you have actually worked in a steel plant? 1, 2. And I might raise my hand too. I started my career in the late 1960s in the Durgapur steel plant. The steel industry is supposed to be the epitome of heavy, dirty, polluting, dangerous industries. And I worked in the coke ovens, which is the most polluting and dangerous of all. So anyway, you know, but anyway, the point is that greening steel is imperative to get out of this, you know, characterization of the steel industry as being among the most polluting and among the most dangerous, of all industries. Now, in the previous sessions, we had a question. We had, lots of discussion on, apart from CBAM, and actually, India's framework agreement with the EU has a provision that any concessions given to any other party will automatically carry over. And for the life of me, I do not think that the EU will be able to impose CBAM on the US. So the question of CBAM as a driver of green steel is actually open to question. Then the question is, why of government mandates? Now, we have seen in the previous 2 presentations, and I must say that, the presentation by Nilima, while very informative, it was speculative on 2 counts. Continuous depreciation of the rupee and an increased trend of coal prices, coking coal prices. And frankly, I think this is somewhat speculative, because you see, if there's a worldwide movement away from coal, there is little reason for coal prices to increase. And if India's development strategies bear fruit, and that we are able to be more competitive in our industries, we are able to be more export-oriented, there is no particular reason why India's depreciation would continue as they are. However, India does potentially have an important competitive advantage in green hydrogen, and that is the reason why, if not the legacy steel plants, at least the upcoming steel plants can switch to green steel and be competitive globally. So, on the question of government mandate, let me say this, that India's government mandate will actually come from the NDCs. India's NDC is about is not about specific sector-specific emissions targets. It's about a decline in emissions intensity of the economy. And that follows from the modeling techniques, which I won't go into, which go behind the NDCs. For future editions of the NDC, I do not think that we can have as rapid a decline as we have projected in the current NDCs. And there are many reasons for that, including the fact that there is to be a major fillip to the MSME sectors to take care of the employment problem in this country. And that automatically means that we cannot afford to cannot visualize such a sharp, steep decline. So given these, I do not see any particular reason why in the future the government would impose emissions constraints. That's what a mandate actually amounts to, for any particular sector, and particularly a hard-to-abate sector. So there are lots of these question marks which have to be put around, this whole problem. Now let me give the floor now to our distinguished panelists. So first is Mr. Budhankar.
Yes, sir.
So you two have worked at a steel plant, so you understand the issues about sustainability. So please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please have 5 minutes.
So thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Thank you for inviting, thank you, CII, Climate Catalyst, IIEE, and Terry, and UC Berkeley for inviting me. I feel really proud. In this hall, there are 80, 100 people sitting, and 3 or 4 we have worked in the steel plant, and we literally dirtied our hand on steel melting shops, taking samples and analyzing those samples and working at various places. You asked me how and I represent a company called ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel. While I would like to correct Govind and Nandan, you said that we are a potential green steel producer, but we are already a green steel producer. And on 28th of January, we got our hot roll coil and cold roll coil already certified as hot roll coil as 4-star and cold roll coil as 3-star certified. And the reason being, we are one of the single location globally largest DRI plant, gas-based DRI plant. So we have a nameplate capacity of 7.6 million tons in single location over there, and gas-based obviously, and then the downstream processes are very, very, cost effective, I would say, and energy efficient processes. That's what we have put in, whether it is the hot roll mill or HSM is concerned. Coming to the question, Dr. Ghosh asked me how difficult it is. It is very, very difficult, because all of you know that steel is all about the percentage of carbon. Steel is an alloy which has percentage of carbon in it. So without carbon, you can't make a steel, whether it is less than 1%, so carbon has to be there. Now, where from this carbon would come, unless and until you put that carbon in. So taking coal absolutely out or fossil fuel absolutely out is very, very difficult from this thing, and cement as well, because cement has a process related. So these two sectors, it is very difficult, I would say hardest to abate as far as, but still then we have tried to make this as possible to abate sectors, and every efforts is being made. Fossil fuel, of course, transition fuel. Gas is, of course, a transition fuel. We have used it. Coal, instead of coal, if we can have natural gas, you will have 20 to 30% lesser emissions. That's what we have thought of, and we have gone for it. But at the same time, cost also matters. And the numbers which have been shown on the screen, that clearly tells that if a steel making requires about 20 to 22 gigacalories of energy, and if that comes from say coal route versus the gas route, the gas would be almost 20 to 30% expensive as compared to the coal route which is there. And the same is the final product which has been made. So obviously making steel through DRI, EAF and gas route is expensive as compared to the BF, BOF route. Scrap making is maybe comparable, but availability scrap is even a big time issue which is there. So it is difficult, but not absolutely impossible. We have shown it to the world that it is possible. We have been the lowest as far as integrated steel plant is concerned. If India's emission is 2.54 average, we are close to about 2.15 at the crude steel level, which is about 18 to 20% lower as compared to our peers. And we would like to maintain that. We also have developed a roadmap which will reduce our footprint by about 20% by end of this century. And this comes by absolute number of levers which we have used, whether it is 44 to 50% of our grid electricity is green. We have increased our scrap percentage from 4 to almost 6.7% also at times we had gone. And then the process efficiency, which we talked about, using a lot of AI and ML related use cases we have, especially on center plant or especially on electric arc furnace, blast furnaces, which is actually optimizing the fuel which is required to be put into the furnaces. So that's how we are able to drive this. The journey has already begun, and although it is difficult and we have done the study also. So to have a net zero, at today's the cost will be close to about $400. That's what, and if you are selling steel at $550 a ton, additional $400, nobody is going to. But it's a journey. With the low-hanging fruit, we can have with $100 and all, we can reduce the per ton CO2 emission. But the journey has begun, and maybe when you have any questions, I'll come back to you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Budhankar. And now let me give the floor to Seema Arora. You have 5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Thank you, everyone. And it's been a pleasure to work with Climate Catalyst on this study which the CII undertook. And my colleagues have already presented the findings. I would just like to maybe, mention that that while Dr. Ghosh mentioned that, the NDCs may not give sector-specific, and I agree, targets, and also CBAM is probably down the road because of the various challenges that we see in geopolitics. I still feel that it is not just for the external or for the global reasons that industry and particularly steel industry in this case should be looking at decarbonizing. It's precisely for the reason that Dr. Ghosh said, and I have visited a few steel plants, I've never worked there. It's precisely that we need to do it for our own selves more than anything else. I think the kind of, air we want to breathe. We know air pollution is a huge problem. We're seeing that young people don't want to work in manufacturing locations. We need to make these processes and we need to green these processes because they all want to understand that if I'm working for a workplace, is it actually following those, decarbonizing pathways? Are they going to be net zero? So I think the reason is obviously much more. There is, of course, the global headwinds. There is also the need to compete, get more market access, and all of that will happen, I think. But also, closer home, there's a reason to do it. Energy security is a big reason as well. We don't want to be importing. And of course, coal is because we have coal security, but that's very, very polluting, and we need to move on. And from a point of view of CO2, I talk more from a point of view of SPM and also the, the air we breathe. That's also very important. Having said that, I think this is a study which is going to help in making the ecosystem make a systemic shift. And that's why I think it's an important study. We have looked at, the suppliers. We have looked at the people who would use the green steel. No transition is without challenges. So we will have challenges. I mean, there's no question about it. Now, where do we put the bar? That is what the study gives 2 scenarios. And basically, the bar should not be so high that nobody wants to jump and say, oh, this is something that I can't do, so I will not be doing this. So much cost to it, I'm not going to do. Neither it should be so low that it's so easy and there's no, pull for it. So I think the 2 scenarios that have been built out in the study essentially create few levers Number one, they give very clear policy direction. If we were to follow those pathways, there's a clear policy direction expected for the industry so that they can plan longer term investments. I mean, just now Dr. Jehangir talked about. So if there is clarity that I am going to have a market for what I'm going to produce as green steel, I'm sure more and more investment will flow into that green steel. At the moment, it's not flowing into the green steel. So we have to at least create that pathway so that people start doing that. Now the question is going to pay for it, right? Because are we expecting that the industry will automatically, start investing in producing green steel, or the project, people who are going to buy the green steel, that is the painful part, and I think that's where some suggestions are there, but more needs to be basically talked about. But the study says that the cost to the project is not very high, because if you look at the 26% mandate, if we say it comes in, then the project cost doesn't really go up. There's still a cost to produce it, and therefore we need to look at that. I also believe that if India was to put a mandate like this, we should be able to pull more global capital to do this as well. So I think that can also be a good lever for industry to be, I mean, I know a lot don't need that global capital, but a lot need also that global capital. A lot of the Indian companies have, when we talk to them, they say we have even the finances to go till 2030, but that is probably only till the 3-star rated thing. If we are talking of something deep decarbonization, 4-star, 5-star, which is where I think a mandate like this will give that direction, that pathway, that policy clarity, and government being the biggest procurer of the steel, as was mentioned, and also it's in the hands of one buyer, government as a procurer. It's not fragmented across many, so if that obviously whole of the government approach will be required. It's not like, we'll have to have multiple ministries who will have to be brought in. So it's not even that simple. But if it has to happen, I think it's best started through a government mandate. And as CII, I think what we see is that the efficiency gains already are happening, and, some of the investments. But if we have to take that next step, that's where we need this kind of a pathway, policy prescription, where the pathway opens up. You pull the investments. You also start to see that market is ready to accept it, and then you see a systemic shift, and you see that whole value chain approach and the demand side as well as the supply side both coming together. So that's the hope we have, and we are open to, of course, having more dialogue and discussion to see how we can take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Seema. And I now give the floor to Mr. Mohit Bhargav.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much. First and foremost, thanks to Sequoia and Climate Catalyst and CII team. Sequoia, obviously, because they helped us prepare this report, so that makes a lot of sense. And that is where probably, Dr. Ghosh, I'll have to come back to you when you said that Neelima's report had errors. From my side, I think both the reports were excellent reports. A lot of good work has gone in there. Speculation is something which is there in every report. So if you ask any economist, his life is speculation. So I think let's not get into that domain of what may happen, what may not happen. What is clearly brought out in that report is, I think, that the time of green steel is now. And if we are looking at a life cycle costing kind of view, which will obviously factor in the cost of INR depreciation if we import coal, keep on importing coal for 40, 50 years. And there's enough evidence over the last 20 years data which shows that there has been a clear depreciation. And if you look at the coking coal cost, all these things have gone up. So I think what I might actually add is that the report by Neelima was fairly conservative. I mean, if I would have my way, it would have been much more optimistic in terms of showing that we're already there. And that is where, I may add to both Govind and Nandan, that my peeve is actually that you guys are still stuck in the trap of incrementalism, and I think that's how we're approaching this whole problem. I heard the same from both the former secretaries of steel. We need to get out of this. What we are saying is that, okay, we won't invest till we have a clear picture. Now, what clear picture can come? If you don't invest, clear picture doesn't come. The idea of mandate, and I totally agree with Seema here, is that mandate will give us a domestic market. I think we all agree that export under CBAM is not exactly what something the Indian entities are looking at right now. But what makes eminent sense now, as if we set up these steel plants on scale, there is a very good chance that we might get numbers which are very, very attractive, maybe marginally higher, or maybe marginally lower. And I can talk about this from the experience we had in RE. I come from NTPC background. When NTPC and SECI started conducting auctions, the price of solar power was 15 rupees. Today the lowest price is 2 rupees 40 paisa. So this has happened because of the power of aggregation, because of the power of market. It wasn't me or you who brought down the prices. When so many people, so many industries started coming together and they saw a clear demand, a legitimate demand, bankable demand. The bankers were ready to support that initiative. So every time, in fact, the problem we had in the RE field was how to sell the previous bid, because everyone started thinking, okay, the next bid is going to be 5% cheaper, so I'll wait and sign PPA for the next bid. So I'm not saying that might need to be done here, but what can definitely happen, and I totally agree with that 26% number. I mean, we were saying 5%, 10%. If you feel 26% can happen, oh, I think that gives us a clear domestic market only from national companies or the government-owned companies of what? Almost close to 10 million tons. And I'm sure Mr. Bodhankar will be happy to immediately start spending money for that. So if you have a 10 million ton green steel market, and I'm not talking about 3-star, congratulations on 3-star thing, but I feel we need to be very, very clear that we need to go as close. So if you're looking at a number, probably we're looking at less than 1.5 tons kind of number, which is 5-star or closer to 5-star, because that is where we actually get the benefit of the low hydrogen pricing which India has demonstrated. I'm sure all of you are aware, there has been a lot of debate, and I heard Mr. Singh also, I think, mentioning earlier that hydrogen price is not there. Where else you want it to be? We are at $3 and lower than that. Nowhere in the world is hydrogen at $3, green hydrogen. And these are bids submitted by people who are like, in one of the bids it has been won by an entity Semcorp. I don't know whether you guys know, it's one of the largest Singapore entities. In one of the other bids, which was just a shade above $3, even NTPC has bid that number. So $3 is now par for the course. So it's quite possible that if you do a 10 million ton tender for, or if you start going into that scale, and if we ask any entity to aggregate the demand for green hydrogen and do a tender, you might get a number even better than $3. And $3, as we understand and as which you will be happy to invest, I'm sure that is a number most of the companies would be happy to invest. The only challenge I see today, which we gathered during discussions with most of these guys, was that probably there is one element of apprehension with regard to technology, which I am sure Nilima mentioned that it could be settled through a strong contracting mechanism. You could actually have the supplier give you iron-tight guarantees, which can help you through. What I do not understand is why people are still trying to focus on gas-based DRI, because in India, gas-based DRI is very good in Middle East. They are sitting on $1 gas, $1.50 gas. They can do as much DRI based on gas. In India, gas is $10 at least. If you're very, very fortunate. Otherwise, it's not less than $12. So it doesn't make sense at all. So we need to go down the green hydrogen path. And the time is now. If we start today, we take a decision now, or maybe within the next 12 months, that factory or that plant will come up only in the next 5 to 6 years. So by then, and if we put that mandate as suggested by the CII Climate Catalyst team, 26% starting 2031, for example, we are there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mohit Bhargav. Now I'll give the floor to Mr. Alok Kansal. Mr. Kansal, you have the floor and 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the first thing, that why decarbonization is required. As Madam Seema has also mentioned, that it is for our future generations that we can breathe a clean air. The global rise of temperatures, as you all know, is targeted as 1.5 degrees centigrade. I think we have nearly crossed it now also. So next point is that our country, India, has already targeted this by net zero by 2070. I feel that instead of 2070 in one go, we should phase out in at least 5 to 10 years gap what are our targets to be set for the carbon emissions. And definitely net zero is a very optimistic target. But on the side of railways, because I come from railways background, our target of 2030 for the net zero carbon emissions will be achieved, because we are the producers of the carbon dioxide basically when we do the transportation, earlier by the diesel, earlier by the coal trains, coal engines, then came by the diesel. Now the full 99% of the electrified routes have come on the Indian Railways. So, but then the topic of the day, the building demand for the green public procurement. I wonder why we should say building demand. Demand is already there. Like for example, in Indian Railways, rails is one of the major component. That is about 1.35 million tons. Every year we need rails for laying of new tracks, doublings, gauge conversions, dedicated freight corridors. And this is a sole supplier is only SAIL. That's the PSU. And so there is a assured and dedicated demand from the Indian Railways as far as rails are concerned. Similarly, the rolling stock, the coaches, the wagons, the engines, the EMUs, and you must have heard the latest names, Namo Bharat, Vande Bharat, all these are stainless steels and different type of steels. Earlier we used to procure it on our own. Now the various PUs and also the contracting agencies are allowed to procure the steel from the open market. And as we all know that 80% of in our country, the producers are in private hands. So 80% are in private hands and remaining 20% maybe in government hand, like the Ministry of Steel, SAIL or RINL only. So on one hand, we are talking about the green public procurement, as the number is fixed as about 20 to 25%. So this demand is already assured. Only thing, the mandate, what is required, is to be given by the Ministry, the Government of India. I'll just give you an example. When we are serving in any of the government ministries, the air travel was only allowed by Air India, when the Air India was in the hands of the Government of India. No matter the price is higher, but then we are supposed to travel, because the one pocket spends, other pocket earns. It doesn't matter at all. So the cost of the production, as was mentioned, that it is maybe 8-10% higher also. But then the project cost definitely is in the range of 1 or 2% higher only. But who is the end user in railways? End user is the common public. We are the end users who use the trains daily. About 2.36 crores passengers are traveling daily. So they don't come to know what is the price of the steel which has gone in the making of the track or the coach or a wagon. So once a mandate is given by the Government of India that phasing out the requirement of the Indian Railways, say it is about 3 million tons, 1.35 for the rails, 1.354 or something for the rolling stock, and other auxiliary components, it is about 0.5 million tons. I'll say the figure as 3 million tons. So as a very optimistic figure was kept as 10 million tons in times to come, 3 million tons is by the railways only. There is a assured demand. Only thing is that if the cost of the project is a bit higher, it doesn't matter. You will be surprised to know that in last 3-4 years, the capex by the Government of India is about 12.5 lakh crores of the total budget. Out of that, this year, 2.78 lakhs crores have been given to the Indian Railways for the capital expenditure, which includes everything, what I just mentioned to all of you. So, if 2.78 crores becomes 2.8 or 2.9 crores by increase of the cost of the green steel, it doesn't matter at all. Because our aim is that we have to reduce the carbon footprints in our country, come what may. even the PM of the country, when I was entering the hall, I mean the main entry, I saw a placard where the PM has given a beautiful message. I don't know how many of you have gone through it. It just mentioned like that. The rivers flow in our country, they don't drink their own water. The fruits, the trees give the fruit, they don't eat their fruits. The clouds give us water, and we grow food, but they don't eat food. So the mother nature is all there for all of us. So we have to protect our mother nature by converting into everything green, be it a cement or a steel or any other thing. And that is why we are all here, the policymakers, the builders, producers, procurers, technical experts, and the various firms like CII. I was just seeing their presentation. They have covered beautifully, I mean, all aspects of what is being projected further. Similarly, again the PM says that for every developed economy, the steel industry is like a skeleton. You all know that without a skeleton, you can't move. So when the PM of the country go for this and think big, as I mentioned don't say incremental jumps. Let's think big. Let's target 100 million tons by say 2040. So that if you think big, then only you can achieve, okay, you touch 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 million tons. Because the planning has to be done today only. What the roadmap you make today is going to give you fruits maybe after 10 years. But at the same time, the private players have to be also given hand-holding, obviously, because 80% of the producers are private for steel and 98% is for the cement. So I'm sure with the proceedings of this conference, what has been done, I'm very happy to see that it is the 25th, Silver Jubilee year, WSDS is being held. So that a very apt topic has been chosen, that why and how we should go for the large-scale decarbonization. Come what may, cost may be higher initially, but then slowly and finally it will settle down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kansal. And now I give the floor to our last speaker, Mr. J.C. Kakoti.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, CII members and audience. I'll start with a basic question in my mind, and maybe this question cropped up in the mind of the other persons also. Why it is called green steel actually? Why it is called green steel? Because steel is the same steel which is being produced by the process. Okay, so there is the product-wise there is no change in that properties. That mechanical properties are all the same. From engineering terms, but raw material is same. The product is same. What is the difference between what we have been doing since years together, decades together, and what we are going to change it and to make it a green steel? Green steel means which are nowadays, it's a very climate-friendly product. Okay. So if we have three blocks, one is raw material, one is process, one is final product. What is the change where we require? We require the change, transformation in the middle portion, the process portion actually. We have the basic of raw material, same, and product is same. This transformation in the process is required, what we are talking about. That process which generated a lot of carbons, which were that GH greenhouse gas emissions. Now we want to reduce in order to make our country carbon net zero by 2070. Okay. So is it possible? Is it possible that we can achieve this kind of net zero or carbon emission within the stipulated time, whatever has been said by the government of India and by the international forums? Definitely it is yes, because the technology are on the platter. we have to take the technology. Technology, there is no dearth of technologies. The technology is there for renewables. We can replace the conventional fuel-based energies by the renewables. Of course, renewables will have to be backed by the storage system. Then hydrogen injection is already there. Only thing is that cost effectiveness has to be seen. And then that carbon capture and utilization, the system, which is again a process-oriented system, which is going to reduce the carbon emission. And the most important part, which everybody is doing in their system, in their factories, in their industries, is the efficiency. The efficiency can be improved by integration with the IoT system, IoT framework, then new technologies like, new sensors and artificial intelligence. So there is no question that this cannot be achieved. So when we make the entire system transformed to give the same product and reduce and by the process of this, we reduce the carbon emission, then we sell the product is the green steel. Okay, the problem here comes to two problems, two issues are coming here is, one is the cost of the transformation of this process, whether the transformation is cost effective, and another is what is the timeline for changing of this transformation, whether the cost is going to be controlled, whether the cost is going to be suitable for the customers, which are the final procurer, maybe a general citizen of the country, or maybe the industry, the central procurers like central government procurers, or maybe private industries like that. But what is the timeline? Are we going to complete our transformation system within the specified time? For example, CII has given in its report that the demand for green steel is 26 million ton by 2027. Why not 50? Why not 60? Is it not possible to transform the process within that time? It is not possible. That is why we are limiting this target to such a low. Maybe we are not sure whether we will be able to achieve this target or not, because I have seen construction of the projects where sometime we have to wait for the availability of the steel in construction of the heavy structures in our company. But then also we have to wait for quite long time. That steels are not available in many times. So when we speak of green steel, so that we'll have the same problem, or we will be relieved of this problem. Okay, that is one question we have to answer in this case. And second thing, the cost. When we have to popularize the adoption, utilization of the green steel among the people, not among the utilities which are going to construct big projects or such a high infrastructure or large infrastructures like railways or airport or all these infrastructural development projects. Whatever the citizen, normal people actually who are using in their buildings, like in their own buildings, why not we can make the green steel, what we are calling the green steel, as compatible with the normal conventional steel by incentivizing, by reducing the cost of the process actually. We can give some kind of incentives by the government of India or some kind of GST. Of course, Madam was telling they are already going to relieve the 10% of GST from the product. So if the price difference is not much, people will readily come to adopt and procure the green steel. That is one point actually I think in order to make it popular, that people should feel that there is no difference in the cost. So they will be readily accept. And regarding this, again, that green steel, we are already talking about the normal steel, whatever we are using. But we are still lacking in production of the high value ended steel actually. Because being in the application industries like generators, then turbines, all these steels are not readily manufactured in India. Those high-ended, high-value steels are still imported. That technology we have to develop actually. That technology we have to develop, it may not be called, it may not be as a green steel, but as a steel manufacturer sort of a capability of the country, we should be able to be self-reliant, self-dependent, and we should try to make entire requirement of our industry as a Atmanirbhar component. So that being a normal daily requirement of daily means is a common requirement of all of us, not only industries, common people also. So we should look into this and try to make the green steel very popular so that everybody can afford it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kakoti, and we are out of time, so we will have to unfortunately guillotine the Q&A. So let me close here. Of course, I thank all the participants, but with a little ditty that most steel plant workers are familiar with. So let me recite it for you. It may sort of give you a perspective on why we need to move out of the traditional methods of making steel. So it goes like this. He stood before the pearly gates. His face was scarred and old. He stood before the man of fate for admission to the fold. What have you done, St. Peter asked, to gain admission here? I've been a steel plant engineer for many and many a year. The pearly gates swung open wide. St. Peter touched the bell. Come in and choose your harp, my friend. You've had your share of hell.
On that note, I think we'll close the session. Thank you to all our speakers today and for their remarks and excellent discussion, and to our audience for showing up with so much attentiveness, and to the team at CII, Govind, Climate Catalyst Nandan, and Nilima at IECC for producing and presenting their rigorous analysis. And finally, a huge thank you to Terry for giving us the platform to be able to launch our reports here today. And a final one from me. On this gate, you will find some fun tote bags with a key message, key takeaway from today, which basically asks you to keep calm and buy green steel. So I would encourage everyone to please pick up a tote bag on your way out. Thank you so much. Thank you.